What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to the Thursday show, gang. Terry McBride here from rotoscouts.com. Get all the relevant facts in early. 4 games to talk about today. Light little Thursday action. Nothing crazy. Hopefully you guys out there having good weeks, good days. Cujo's here in the chat early. Hope your Thursday's going well too, buddy. Pop the thing up here so we're not just staring at my ugly mug. So a light slate today. It was a good one last night. It was complete pandemonium. As we discussed on the show, we had a lot of action and a lot of stupid values all over the board at a variety of sub 5K prices. And then we just had more and more and more emerge in the hours right before lock, including some that we didn't need, some that we didn't want. We had all sorts of crazy changes, but I had a successful, profitable night. Nothing crazy again. But a couple top 1%ers. I had one in the top 100 that was a chaser in the top 50 until like the final minutes, and then it dropped a couple points. Congrats to Woody C. Again. Took down the FanDuel $3 again. Second time in a week. Another 10K for Woody. Not sure if Woody's out there watching the show, but congrats. Definitely hangs around in the Discord, so that was awesome to see. I pinged him in Discord last night around 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I guess he didn't see it till morning because he woke up and sent a message in there that he wasn't even aware that it was going on. So no sweat. That's the nice way to do it. No sweat, nothing to worry about. There's Woody. Congrats, pal. That was a good lineup. Solid success. So you didn't have to sweat it at all? You just woke up to it? Was the case? Steve Leibowitz is here. What's going on, buddy? Good to see everybody. Check out Roto Scouts on Twitter, on Blue Sky, depending on your social media site of choice. Depending on which hand you like to get your propaganda from, the left or the right. We're on both sites. All we do on that Roto Scouts handle is send out links to these different projection sets. Make sure you're checking out rotoscouts.com. 3-sport day today. Got this NBA slate. We've got a showdown slate for football, and we've got an NHL slate up. Big NHL slate tonight, 10-gamer. Took quite a while to project. That's why we're starting this a little bit late. So let's dive in. Fortunately, it's only 4 games, so we can get through it pretty quickly. So, Vegas board, I'll do it in pretty quick fashion again. Detroit at Charlotte. 2-point spread. Detroit favored on the road. 222-point total. Reasonably good game as far as mining some pieces and parts. LaMelo is highly owned on both sites. We got him under the field, but still a big chunk of him because it's a 4-game slate, and he's one of the top just raw scoring potential guys. Otherwise, we'll see what we get as far as some of the ancillary pieces from either side of that game. Minnesota and Toronto, I would expect we'll see a decent amount of Anthony Edwards once we start going through the sim results here. Minnesota's favored by 7.5 on the road in Toronto. We'll probably have some RJ Barrett shares. Some questionables in the Minnesota on Toronto side, and on the Charlotte side could impact things. We'll go through the injuries in just a second. 225-point total in the Minnesota-Toronto game. Definitely, some obvious names from Minnesota. Mike Conley's coming up a pretty decent amount at a fair price with increasing minutes. So he's an interesting name, but he's also questionable. So there could just be downstream cascade effect if he doesn't play. Utah, San Antonio, we do have Zach Collins confirmed is going to be playing, but Bassey's still showing a ton of value, even just in a 20 and change minute projection. 3-point spread there. San Antonio favored by 3 in a home game. 224-point total. Pretty appealing game environment there. Definitely getting a lot of pieces. I think you can see Colin Sexton on the top of the board on both sites right now, basically doubling his ownership on FanDuel, tripling it in our top 150 on DraftKings. Looks like a fair piece of mid-range value. And then the late game, Orlando and LA, AD and LeBron, the top 2 just raw projected players on the slate. But this game is kind of ugly. 5-point spread favoring the Lakers in a home game. 215.5-point total. Ugly, ugly game. KCP out for Orlando. Wendell Carter Jr. questionable. To dive into some of that, as of the 3:30, KCP out, Wendell Carter Jr. questionable were the 2 new pieces. The probables all day, Trey Mann is probable. We got Colin Sexton, Zach Collins, and Chris Paul all confirmed as being available earlier in the day. And Anthony Davis is probable. Seems like he's going to play. It's just one of those things. They always list AD as probable. At least this year we're not getting LeBron questionable every day. Wendell Carter Jr., as mentioned, still questionable, or is questionable. We'll see if he makes it back tonight. He obviously didn't make it back in yesterday's game. Miles Bridges also questionable. Could be impactful. Mike Conley, again, questionable. Dante DiVincenzo is questionable. Another potential impact as far as minutes and opportunity goes for Minnesota. So those are two key pieces as far as that game. Scotty Barnes is technically questionable. I feel like he's not going to get back. Not totally sure why. Just the tickle in my brain I've had all day is a no on Scotty. But we've got him in right now. That would be impactful for guys like RJ and some of the key pieces from Toronto that we've had on the board. But obviously he is a good player on his own. Jacoby Walter's irrelevant, but Rui Hachimura is also questionable. Outs, Azar Thompson is doubtful to make it back today, but he's at least doubtful, not just straight out. Daquan Jeffries, Nick Richards, Mark Williams, Bruce Brown, DJ Carton, Bruno Fernando, Kelly Olynyk, Emmanuel Quickley, Jordan Clarkson is doubtful, Taylor Hendricks, Walker Kessler, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, Victor Wembanyama, Jackson Hayes, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Bronny James, Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood, and KCP are all out. And that's it. Nice tidy little list for a 4-gamer. Power says, need to get this NBA dialed in. Knows he's going to lose his NFL lineups to some nonsense. Yeah, it's always some nonsense on those showdown slates. XXXXXXXXXX asks if you're going to do an NFL showdown video tonight. Trying to figure out if I can squeeze one in. My goal right now is to get through this and get us up and out of here 5:30-ish. Keep an eye on NBA, in which case I should be able to turn one around. No promises, though, because I just don't like being on in that last hour before the NBA locks. And then if I do it after 7, we're going to get like 8 people because everybody's watching the other show. I'm going to try. No promises. If you want to drop any questions in, I've got the game projected up on the site. We can definitely talk about it during this show, actually. Maybe that's the way to do it. I don't have the NFL board ready, but what I could do is just like pull up the projections file. Maybe we'll do that as a special like little bonus later on for this show. So let's dig in here. Same slate across sites, so we can sort by DK. I had it sorted by FanDuel because I was just hand building a quick little placeholder lineup. And let's get into it. Nice and clean. So a couple big pieces on both sites. We're way ahead of the field on both of these plays, but the field they're popular guys on both sites. Colin Sexton at 5,500, shooting guard and point guard eligible on both sites, 5,400 on the DraftKings slate. Picking up 74% of them on DK, 72% on FanDuel. Again, this is essentially doubling the field. This is closer to tripling the field. Definitely some opportunity for Sexton to take a step forward and, kind of go back toward his 1.13 that he played at last year. So far this year, we've been at 0.90. Little bit of a dip in usage overall. 0.95 per minute on the DraftKings slate. Decent facilitator. 59% true shooting. 18.9% assist rate so far this season. Every reason to believe there's enough on the bone there at those prices for him to drive some success today. Getting a little bit less of them and saving some shares for some of these guys that we got the hard undercuts to and spreading things out. Perfectly reasonable. If you want to be, again, on DraftKings, maybe more like double the field, you're okay there, but you are sacrificing a little advantage on the guy that's coming up as our top value of the day at the guard position. 5.91 value score on DK, 5.5 on FanDuel. Again, we're looking for 5 FanDuel, 5.5 DraftKings, so well above the threshold there. You do also get Anthony Black and Stephon Castle above the line on the DK slate and on FanDuel, actually. So both of those guys providing tremendous value upside. Stephon Castle, just an ongoing situation for him. Played 34 minutes the other night, put up just 21.6 FanDuel points. He's been playing at a 0.80, 0.81 on DraftKings. He's given us some good games. He's given us a few clunkers, averaging 25 minutes a night, but there's the opportunity there with several pieces missing. So just some benefit for everybody for San Antonio right now, and it's a pretty open game environment. He's effectively priced on both sites. We're a little bit below the field on him on FanDuel, but we still did get 40% of him over there. It's a pretty key piece from the mid-range, 46%, and he's a little bit cheaper. Shooting guard only on the DraftKings slate, but it didn't really matter as far as getting to him and getting him basically level with the field in the 40s. Little bit easier of a fit as far as positioning with the dual position on FanDuel. It gives him a decent amount of value. There's a pairing here with Conley and some Chris Paul coming up on FanDuel that I initially put in as just like two guys who came up a decent amount that were point guard only. And I slotted those guys in, and then because all three of these guys have point guard and shooting guard flex. But then I ended up circling back with a little bit of money to move around. And I moved Chris Paul out. I moved Castle in. And I had Anthony Black, Colin Sexton, and I forget what that bought me. I think it bought me John Collins instead of Bassie and moving AD into the center spot. This is just in the hand-built lineup that I made before. But there's a lot of flex back and forth between several of these point guards. And I think it's interesting to have just a few guys that are point guard only that are coming up. And they're all decent to very good plays/players. LaMelo comes up 23% of the time on FanDuel. He comes up 37% of the time on DraftKings. Point guard only on both sites. A little bit more valuable to the DraftKings slate at 95 than he comes up on FanDuel at 94, though. 23% is not nothing, but it's a hard undercut to the field. 37% on DraftKings is a gentler undercut to the field. I think you can probably approach the field pretty safely on DK, and it's obviously a player with a ton of ceiling on. On the FanDuel slate, given how big an undercut that is and how the positioning is falling around him, it was just a little bit difficult to pay up that much at guard when I was building that lineup. Clearly, there are paths to success there because we did get him 23% of the time in our top 150 performing lineups. But that's less than what the field was using him at. So it seems like maybe dancing around some of that, despite him looking pretty good. 132 per minute this season on FanDuel, 142 per minute on DraftKings, 36.7% usage. It's got to be easily the highest usage among these guards. Yeah, by five and change points. The highest usage rate among guards. Any given slate, LaMelo can be out there doing whatever he wants. If Bridges doesn't go, there's benefit there. Conley, 4,900 across sites. Played 30 minutes in his last game. Put up just 17.3 FanDuel points, which is disappointing. But he's typically a .92 player. That's what he was this year. That's what he was last year. So as long as we're getting those minutes, and that's a bump of I gave him 4 minutes on top, but that was a bump of 5 minutes the other day. Long as there's a little bit of upside for minutes, and if we get Conley, no DiVincenzo, there could be an opportunity for him to take a couple of additional shots and do a couple more things. That said, good shooter on the outside that he could lose a few potential assists from. So give and take there. In reverse, if you get DiVincenzo and you don't get Conley, that could lead to some additional facilitation for DiVincenzo. He's a pretty decent in that regard. So just keep an eye again on the ins and outs as far as Minnesota goes. But Conley's definitely looking like a piece at these prices. He's just flat cheap for the potential minutes and production. 42% of them, even with the field on FanDuel. 28% of them below the field a little bit on DraftKings, but not critically so. Julian Champagnie, mix and match piece on FanDuel, 20%, a little bit below the field, 18%, same deal on DraftKings. Another guy for a fair price, 4,600 shooting guard, small forward, 48 on FanDuel. He's just a lower per minute producer than some of these other options that have fallen into that price range right now. He's a low usage guy at 15.5%, 0.78 per minute overall, 0.81 per minute. Another guy who benefits from absences for San Antonio, but not in huge ways. He's approached 1 per minute in his last game, 26.4 FanDuel points in 28-1. You can get that kind of a ceiling from him from the mid-range. So he's perfectly fine to go to, but he doesn't really land like a critical piece or somebody to get up beyond the field on. And on FanDuel, explosive upside, 57% of our top 150. He's very highly owned on the site, but we are above the field on him there, which is great. It's exactly where I want to be when he comes in at 8,700. He's a 1-1-2 player per minute this season on basically unchanged usage from last year, 1-2-1 last year. There's more production there. there's monster games. Just play it at exactly 1 per second, apparently. 38.8 FanDuel points in 38.8 minutes the other day. That's impressive. But one of the more secure paths to star caliber minutes, and 37 to 38 of them, for a very fair price. He's 9,600 on DraftKings. That's a completely different price point. Point guard, shooting guard eligibility versus shooting guard, small forward is interesting as far as the fit, but he's only 12% exposed in our top 150, and that's a reasonably big undercut to the field. Field's probably about double that. Cade Cunningham came up that way on both sides if you look in the next line. 15% hard undercut to the field on FanDuel, 12% hard undercut to the field on DraftKings. This is not because Cade isn't poised to succeed in this matchup. I said it about LaMelo on this side, but there's no reason to think that Cade couldn't do everything he wants going back the other way. It's not like LaMelo's going to be D'ing up. So if you want to push some additional shares of Cade, it's just on DraftKings, those pay-up shares fell into LaMelo. And then all these guys around him obviously taking up shares as the value plays. And on FanDuel, we didn't even get the LaMelo pay. I mean, we did, but we got that below the field. So more of it went here than went here, but we're below on both guys. Just because probably some of these guys' shares landing at point guard, because we'll get lineups with all three of those guys in, so you need one of them in point guard in a lot of these to have that much of them. And then you've got the big chunks of Conley and Chris Paul soaking up point guard only shares. So there's only so much room. These guys are just getting boxed out. If either of them, Cade Cunningham or LaMelo, had shooting guard eligibility like Ant does, they would be at much, much bigger exposures and at least level with the field. So it's just a price versus positioning thing. A little bit more open on DraftKings as far as being able to get to those guys, because you can take the Cade shares and swap them in for some of those LaMelo spots. If you want to just kind of level both guys in like the 20s somewhere, I think that would be fine. Brendan Miller at 69, shooting guard, small forward on DraftKings, less than the field, 10.67% exactly on both sites in our top 150. He's a $7,000 same positioning option on FanDuel. He's fine. It just looks like kind of an is who he is spot, but that player this year is 1.01 per minute on FanDuel, 1.04 on DraftKings. Decent assist rate, mediocre true shooting rate of 51.7, but he's not terrible. For the price, that's not a bad option, but he's just getting boxed out, I think, by better options overall at those positions on this slate, whether it's up the salary board or down it. Again, Chris Paul, playing fairly well, 1.06 per minute on FanDuel, 1.09 per minute on DraftKings, still 41% assist rate. Is still Chris Paul. He's going to mostly be in an is what he is spot. It's just a fair price to get that kind of production. 61 is not all that expensive for 1.06. So I think he's swapping in and out of shares with Conley in a lot of those situations. Conley's getting more because he's only 4,900. But we got both guys right around the field on FanDuel. Chris Paul's a lot less relevant to the DraftKings slate, though. At 63 on DraftKings, he barely landed. 8% and below the field. So it's relevant that we're that much below the field on him. But for our top 150, he didn't land nearly as effectively as Conley did on DK for 49. Jalen Suggs, 31% on FanDuel. Fine with that. Fine with a little bit more. He's a productive player, 1.04 per minute. But at 6,700, again, there's just better, cheaper alternatives that might buy you the difference between a Zach Collins and somebody mediocre at power forward, or paying up from LeBron to AD. That wouldn't do it, but you know what I mean. So I think Suggs sacrifices some shares to that, but in a raw sense, perfectly fine. He's approaching a 5 value score on FanDuel. He's more expensive relative to the cap on DraftKings, just a 4.89 value score where we're looking for 5.5. 8.6%, the same exposure that we got Chris Paul under on both players on DraftKings. 63-68, Paul is the better buy between the two. Even though we got him less than the field, I would still probably lean that way as far as investing because it buys me more other spots with relatively similar expectations of production. That's a 3-point difference as far as that projection goes. Suggs skews higher on the ceiling, but in the median, they're not that different. Mamba's here. What's going on, Mamba? Doug Gillies here. Doug loves Bassey, Collier, Black, and Naw, and Jonathan Isaac as value today. We will get to a number of those players. I'm not sure where Collier came up. I'm not sure where Naw came up. Naw's there. I haven't seen Collier yet, but he should be in here somewhere. I don't know. There he is, right next to Naw. So we didn't get much of either of those two guys. But I do agree there's potential value there. I've got them at 25 and 24 minutes, respectively. They're just kind of low-end usage, low-end production per minute, guys. 0.78 for Naw this year, 0.73 on the FanDuel scale, 0.79, 0.72, respectively, on DraftKings. They're both very cheap. I just think that some of those shares are just getting consumed up here rather than down here. But like I said at the top, if you want to go away from a monster 50% exposure to Anthony Black and just bring him down toward the field a little bit more, stay above, keep your position, be 10, 15 points above the field, but maybe not double, triple, whatever that represents. At 44, point guard, shooting guard, those are reasonable pivots, right? That's 41 for Naw, who's shooting guard, small forward, so you can do it. 35 for Collier is very, very cheap. You get a 4.80 value score. You are sacrificing some value there, but not necessarily as compared to any of these guys. Those are essentially the same point per dollar values. So it's a reasonable enough pivot given how cheap those guys are if you're replacing these guys' value, and then that buys you something else from here or something else at one of the forward spots. As far as the other guys in that statement go, Bassey for sure we're going to see in a minute. Anthony Black's got to be around here somewhere. He was coming up. There. Oh, second overall. I think I mentioned him and then skipped over him and started talking about Stephon Castle. But yeah, Anthony Black looks terrific up at the top of the board. And Jonathan Isaac was coming up pretty good for us too. Jonathan Isaac, very good point per minute performer. It's just the minutes typically are in the lower 20s. I've got him at 22 today, I think. It was either 20 or 22. I forget where I landed. We'll see him in a second. And he was still coming up. So you get value out of Isaac. And if he trends up into the mid-20s, you could potentially get a lot of value out of Isaac. Anthony Black just situationally at 4,900. Both guard spots on FanDuel. Both guard spots on DK for 4,400. Major piece. 50% exposure on DK. 33% way above the field on both sites. Just a secure building block as far as a cheap guy. Fairly reliable trajectory toward those minutes. 29-3 in their last game, put up 26 FanDuel points. That's right on track for his 0.88 per minute. So there's just, I think, reasonable is who he is for cost value right there. 5.07 value score on FanDuel, 5.61 on DraftKings. A better value to the DraftKings slate. That's why we got more of them over there. Christian Valentine, I think I used to watch you years ago. Hopefully you mean on YouTube and not just like around on the streets and stuff. I would assume that would be if you were an Awesemo fan. That was where I was. That's where you would have seen me. I think that's the only place you would have seen me. Yeah, I figured. Welcome, buddy. Did you just find this today? Poking around on YouTube? Let me know how you found it. Was it on like Twitter or via YouTube or what? I'm trying to figure out just the best way to spread the word. Tell your friends. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe bell so you know when to go live. I do a show basically for every basketball slate during the week. The website is Rotoscouts, rotoscouts.com, Christian, and access to everything. NBA projections, NFL projections, NHL projections right now. Under $1 a day for access to all three sports. When baseball's back in season, we're doing baseball. Been doing it for a couple years now, so I'm glad you finally found us. Typed NBA DFS, we were like the fourth down. All right, I'll take that. Fourth down, not bad. That's what the beauty of trying to slide in this like 4 o'clock window. That's why I keep trying to kick the show a little bit earlier. Keep falling back into like 4:30, but 4 o'clock would be beautiful because nobody's there. So continuing on through some of these guards. Talked about Suggs. Just onesie, twosie shares of a lot of these guys on both sites. Once we get all this weight up here, 8% of $3,800 Cody Martin. He's 46 on FanDuel. We really didn't get him. He's a much better value on the DraftKings slate, but we still only got him 8%. That's below the field. Field's at like 10, 12. That is a place where you can take some of these shares. If you're getting off of some of Anthony Black or if you're getting off of some of Stephon Castle for a little bit less, 1,000 less than Castle, basically. That's not a terrible pivot if you're using him at like the guard only spot. Austin Reeves just 6% on FanDuel, 7% on DraftKings, a little bit below the field on both sites. Reasonable expectation of production. I mean, 0.94 per minute so far this season. FanDuel, 0.98 per minute on DraftKings. 60.7% true shooting, 22.7% assist rate. For the money, he's definitely a decent producer. It's just, when he runs against all those values at these positions, he's another guy just kind of getting boxed out of shares. But if you find yourself with additional shares of him, that's not really problematic. If you're 10% against the field or like level with the field there, same thing, 10, 12, even 15% on a player like that. That's fine from those mid-range prices. There's enough on the board that you're covered there. Trey Mann, no real love on either side. 4% below the field on DraftKings. Malachi Branham, 4% below the field. Didn't get him at all on FanDuel. Couple outlier guys site to site outside of onesie twosies for these guys. We didn't really get much of Scotty Barnes. 38-point projection on DK where he's a point guard only for 87. He's completely different positioning and price on FanDuel, 81, power forward, small forward, so functions a little differently. We did get him 10% of the time, but again, I'm not totally expecting Scotty. Keep an eye on that one. You could see him drop out, but he doesn't look like he came through as a overly critical piece. We got him below the field at 10%. 22% of Davion Mitchell. Kind of interesting. Could maybe knock him down a little bit, actually, if we do actually get Scotty back. He's just a low per minute guy anyway. He's been at 0.76 this year on half a point of additional usage, taking like an additional shot every 3 games. But if Scotty's back, if he's back, there could be a minutes crunch. There could be a usage crunch around that. I don't really love Davion Mitchell in that situation. He's a decent facilitator. He's not a good shooter. He's not a good scorer. 28.4% assist rate is the only thing giving him any kind of life. I don't love this spot, but it does, that's consistent with the field. He's a $4,500 point guard only, so that's where the missing shares from up here landed. But if you wanted to take those and honestly sink him into Mike Conley as long as he's going at 49, get to Anthony Black, that's just the slightly cheaper alternative to those guys, where a lot of these guys are either a little bit more expensive or they're differently positioned shooting guard, small forward. Like Keontae George is a good player, good play, 16% of them in level with the field, but 56 is very different than the 45 there. And most of that's probably going to shooting guard. Did I leave anybody important out? D'Lo, none on FanDuel, 4% on DraftKings, just in a backup role these days. 24 minutes off the bench is not really appealing. His production's been way down. Not a fan. Mikey, what's going on, buddy? Filling in NBA lineups right now? You found this randomly? Wild. Go YouTube algo. Mike McCarthy, what's going on, man? I think I'm going to be seeing JP on Sunday at Fake Thanksgiving. He and the fam are coming in for, I think, the week. So we're going to get together. He's coming to, we do Fake Thanksgiving at Janine's house every year. Oh, that's awesome, dude. I'm glad you found us. My site is rotoscouts.com. Check it out. Jump into the Discord, too. Here, let me drop a link into the Discord for everybody who's just finding us today. Grab an invite here. All right, good stuff. So I think that wraps up guards fairly effectively. I don't think we skipped over anybody. Let's jump off to forwards here for a bit. Lowry marketing coming up way different across sites. John Collins is a big piece on both. 59% of them on the FanDuel slate, power forward and center eligible at 71. 42% of them on DraftKings at 72. But look at marketing. Stark difference. Both forward spots on FanDuel for 75. We got him, but just 16% of our top 150 and a relatively hard undercut to the field. Looks like one of the fair mid-range type guys that we're just not getting quite as competitively. At 71, he's a different play. Same positioning, 50% exposure in our top 150 on DK. Nicely above the field, 5.19 value score. Falls short of our 5.5 that we want on DraftKings, but nobody gets there at a forward spot on DK. So it's just, again, that tells you all you need to know about all the value that's at guard and why you're taking so much of that value at guard, because none of these guys give you quite as much in a points per dollar sense. But this is where we're getting our good players, our just good NBA players, Markkanen, Collins, LeBron coming up third in DraftKings exposure at forward, 36%, level with the field. Again, one of the highest raw projections. I believe it was him and AD on both sites, top two in the projections today. On FanDuel, we did get Collins, but we did not get much LeBron. We got some, 1 in 5. But below the field, he's a little bit clunkier as far as the points per dollar, 4.96 versus a 5.0. Actually, he's closer to the FanDuel number. 5.0 is what we're looking for on FanDuel. At 99, 10-1 over here, he's just a 5.0, but we get more versus the field, and we get more overall on DK. He's been playing really well, 1.40 per minute on DraftKings. The assist rate, 41.9% this year. Doing a lot of work as the primary facilitator. Still scores like LeBron James. Looks great. Initially in the season, and in an ongoing sense, he's given up some shooting and scoring to AD, but he's picked up the points as far as the fantasy production goes, and he's actually, basically right back where he's supposed to be, being LeBron James, even with that couple points dip in shot attempts. So a lot of upside for LeBron at the price. Definitely like getting to him, and no issues if you want to take more on the FanDuel slate, bring him up to the field, 25, 30%, wherever that number is. It's LeBron James. You can always go there in the point per minute sense, and it's not a bad price. Keldon, mix and match piece on FanDuel at 17%. I'm always happy to be below the field on Keldon. Just a mediocre per minute producer for the prices you usually find him at. 0.92 is not terrible for 56, both forward spots, and we did get him. But overall, 4.76 is a value score compared to 5+ for the next three guys, 5 here. We didn't get Markkanen. I don't love the Keldon play. 19% usage, but again, another guy who benefits from missing bodies in San Antonio. 34 FanDuel points in 29-2 the other day. 5,300 on DraftKings is a different story. That's a nicer price fit. 32% of the time in our top 150 lineups. It's basically where the field's at. I would have no problem making a decision on Keldon, knocking him down by a few points against the field. If you want to take a few more shares, it's okay. But I think the more you pile on above the field on a player like Keldon, as long as you're not risk averse, that's fine. But the less inclined to take risks you are, I think that's a big one to start building up. It's kind of a clunky player. It's a rickety bridge. Speaking of bridges, Miles Bridges. 36%, assuming he plays 6,500. That looks like a pretty good spot on the FanDuel slate. We got ahead of the field on Bridges and behind the field on LaMelo coming out of Charlotte. It's the opposite on DraftKings, 27% on DK, a little bit below the field, but kind of a gentle slope against the field. So if you want to go back to the field on either site, that's fine. But I do like the idea of a little bit of an advantage there on FanDuel, 1.01 per minute. If the field's not going to be crazy highly on top of a player like that, I think that's a decent spot where you can level up a little. Travis Duarte's got a balanced lineup with Wagner being the only high-priced guy. Yeah, wager going to go him. Yeah, I like Wagner. Where is he? It's right here. 23% exposed on FanDuel, 16%, little hard undercut to the field on DraftKings as far as the numbers go, but that is easily this year a player where you can say, hey, I just want a little bit more and not be making a mistake. He has earned that mantle this year. So if you want to take more Franz, I think there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. 1.27 on FanDuel, 1.29 on DraftKings. One of the true 30% usage guys on the slate, doing basically whatever he wants. So yeah, major opportunity for some upside there. As it mapped out across 150, didn't come up quite with the field, but definite chunks of them on both sides. So security for top lineup production. And especially if you're building like one lineup, that's a perfectly fine player to choose. Jonathan Isaac, we mentioned him before. Terrific per minute production, 1.09 per minute on FanDuel, 1.03 this year with upside for more. He was a 1.16 player last year. Believe he was in the 1.2s for a couple years or a year prior to that. So we get enough on a per minute sense. It's just we need the minutes. He's averaged just 16.5 in the 13 games he's played this year. He did play 21.9 the other night, and that's what I gave him back, 22. I couldn't remember if it was 22 or 20. Gave him back to 22. He's pulling a decent amount of upside on FanDuel, 33% ahead of the field there. He's both forward spots on the FanDuel slate at 47. He's power forward and center eligible on DraftKings for 43. 24% and level with the field. I have no issues taking him as an additional value square, and he's really one of the few point per dollar value guys. We talked about Julian Champagny at in the guards breakdown, but at like power forward or center, you don't really have that much as far as a point per dollar value that's not a guard forward eligible player. So he's a reasonable piece to grab a few additional shares of if you wanted to be, even like 35%. And you're sacrificing just some opportunities to put those guys in that position, but everybody up there's got multi-position, so you can still get to that mix of those players. So it's not a terrible angle to add a little bit more on top of Isaac if you want to pivot off of, get into some of those high-priced guards that we talked about, right? He would be an angle into, all right, I can't get like Castle or Anthony Black or whoever in that guard spot. If I want to pay up at that guard spot, get different than the field with still, kind of parallel trajectory as far as the optimal path goes. So that's a reasonable angle. RJ looking pretty good on FanDuel, mediocre on DraftKings. 5+ value score, 4.93 on DraftKings, where he's 8,900, 8,400 on FanDuel is a pretty nice price. He's been at 1.20 per minute so far this season, covering a lot of ground for missing bodies. There would be an impact for him a little bit if Scotty comes back. Much more so when it's everybody's back. If we get Scotty and IQ and everybody. But he's been playing really well, and especially if there's no Scotty again tonight, that's upside for sure. Looks good in the situation that he's projected for, which is Scotty on the court, and would gain ground, I think. So only upward trajectory for RJ. We're getting him nearly 40% of the time against the field. That's a little bit more than the field on FanDuel. A little bit less for the higher price and the lower value score on DraftKings at 18%. But if you want to kick him up, and again, especially if there's no Scotty, you can kick that up into the 20s and be all right on it. Wagner we just discussed, but again, fire away for additional shares. 16% and below the field on DraftKings. If you want to take that into the 25-30 range, double that and be level with the field, you're not necessarily making a mistake. It's just how his current projection price bounces off some of those others. But once we're post-lock, once the game tips, this could go north in a hurry. Tobias, no real love for him on FanDuel, 8.6% below the field. I'm always happy to be below the field on Tobias, honestly. 14% below the field on DraftKings. Same exposure for Grant Williams. He's another undercut to the field on the FanDuel slate. Same thing with Brandon Miller, who we talked about already. All those guys are fine as far as per minute production, 0.91, 0.83 at a Grant. But for the price, with all those other positional fits for either spend ups at the forward spots or values of the guards, they're just getting boxed out of shares. And these are two guys I don't mind sacrificing as far as if I'm getting all those better plays in those spots. I don't mind being behind the field on Grant Williams. I don't mind being behind the field on Tobias. Less so on Tobias, but so far this year, the usage in Detroit has been lower than what it was. 0.98 down to 0.91. I feel like that's realistic. I think this is where we're going to live. Nas, mix and match piece on FanDuel. Same deal on DraftKings. 5,300, 5,400. We all know his upside truly resides in when he steps into monster minutes upgrade. Got him at his usual 25. He looks playable, but not a standout. Multi-position eligible on both, though. On a short slate, a guy like that in his 25 minutes could deliver value. Like, there's no real notion that a Charles Bassey would necessarily outperform Nas in a per minute sense. And if Nas is going to be 10% and Bassey's going to be way more highly owned than that for similar pricing with power forward eligibility, I think, if I'm remembering correctly on FanDuel, that's an interesting back and forth as far as what that production and 25-minute projection might actually look like. Rui's still questionable, 9% exposed on both sides. He's mediocre, 0.75 per minute this year. That's down a tenth of a point per minute. The usage has been down by about 3 points. He's kind of, I don't know, the minutes are there, but the production is not the most relevant offensive piece for that Lakers team right now. Timmy Hardaway, no love, 5-6% across sites. We did get some Julius Randle at 14% on FanDuel, 7,400. That's below the field, but that's interesting exposure, just 4% and way below the field on him, on $3,000 Malachi Branham, on Jaden McDaniels, Malik Beasley, Harrison Barnes, Josh Green, Filipowski, Noah. Again, Noah and whoever that was we were talking about before as value guys in salary ranges that basically replicate the potential from some of those other guard guys. Less so at the forward spot because you don't have that direct pivot necessarily. But at the guard spot, which he has eligibility for on both sides, I think he's a reasonable price pivot. Given a decent security of minutes, not much of an opponent in Toronto. Similar for a guy like Grady Dick, but Dick's more expensive, 57.62. He's an okay per minute producer, 0.83, 0.86 across sites, decent usage, but not much opportunity showing for him. Nothing really else down board here. At the center. So there's Bassie. Right, so he doesn't have power forward on FanDuel, but Nas does have center. There he is. Right, so for 54 for Nas versus 48 for Bassie, there's a bit of a price difference. In a per minute sense, Bassie's put up 1.26, but it's in a significantly smaller sample. He's played 7.5 minutes per game over 8 games. He did put up a monster number the other night, which is essentially this, 29.6 in 21-4. Got him just at that same 21 minutes tonight. But Naz Reid is capable of shooting up to that 1.2 per minute production on any given night as well. And he's got much more security of playing specifically 25 minutes. With anything goes haywire upside for more, obviously. So as a center pivot between those two guys for like a mid-range price, I don't think Naz is off the board. I think that's where some of that 8% comes from. But Bassie looks great. I mean, the production is real. The 1.26 is small sample this year, 1.20 last year in his, again, similar kind of a backup role. Definitely a productive player when he's on the court, and he only costs 48 on FanDuel, where he's center only, 28% at the one bite at center site. On DraftKings, 4,000, he is a totally different play. We got him 52% of the time. That's above the field. 6.14 is one of the healthier value scores overall on the slate. Is it the highest? Probably not the highest with some of those guards. Maybe it is. It is. So that's our biggest point per dollar value guy on the DraftKings slate at center. Or overall. Dropping him into a big chunk of your center shares, half your lineups, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's pretty comfy. If it was in the 90s, I'd be saying like, all right, if you want to peel back some of this and, maybe get to some of these other plays, at 50%, you got plenty of room to move pieces around with other stuff. And really, there's no crazy appealing center-only guy outside of Anthony Davis, obviously, as a giant pay-up, but he didn't really land. Just 10% on DK. We got him 30% of the time on FanDuel. That's, of course, a significant piece. He's our most highly projected raw projection guy. You're sacrificing some Pirtle in that equation. You get 12% of them here. Either one of those guys, if you want to take a few additional shares, no problem with it. Way more aggressively so on AD. If you double this on AD, it's perfectly fine. I would probably play that alongside that $4,000 value, though, and maybe sacrifice like some of these shares that are landing at center. Collins and Isaac, again, both very strong plays today. But if you're pivoting out of those shares to get to some AD, I think we all know that could pay dividends. At 68 center only on FanDuel, 66 center only on DraftKings, Rudy Gobert did not really land. 8% hard undercut to the field on FanDuel. 16%, we got him a lot more on DK with the ability to put centers together on that site. I'm sure that's where that difference is coming from. He's fine. 0.93 per minute FanDuel, 0.91 per minute DraftKings. He's never a player I really go to. He's like the ultimate collector of fantasy points. And I talk about that a decent amount, collectors versus creators of fantasy points. I'm typically looking for more creation than what Rudy Gobert provides. A lot of stocks, a lot of rebounds, and defensive scoring from Rudy. But he gets there from time to time. He was a higher-end player last year at 1.12 overall. Should be nothing to stop them from dominating against Toronto, but I just question what the true upside looks like with either value from lower prices or just upside from guys like, pivoting up to guys like AD, even Jakob Poeltl. Grant, we talked about. No real exposure on FanDuel and fine with it. DraftKings, you got 14% of them, probably mostly landing at power forward. Jalen Duren, mix and match piece on both sides. 14% on FanDuel, 13% on DraftKings. Just kind of slides in between the price levels. So at 66, he's probably just picking up a ton of shares from just being like, all right, I got value and stars up and down my lineup, and now I'm at center, and I got 66, 68, something like that. I can't quite reach. I could go to Rudy, but we don't love him. I think that's where just a lot of those shares are falling, or it's just taking like Rudy's not good enough to pay off 68. 66 from Duren works a little better and spends 200 more functionally elsewhere. So he's picking up a decent amount, 1.14 per minute. Put up a monster 51.9 in 30 minutes the other day. I don't dislike that. I'd rather have Ant if I could get him. Even if, again, I'm working him in at center. But that's not a bad per minute player. For such a low price, 114 for 6,600. Let's see. He's the second best per minute producer on the entire slate, priced at or below that price. It's pretty interesting. Zach Collins, 26% on the FanDuel slate. A little bit below the field. But again, that is a player that I actually pivoted around to get to because I like the per minute upside. He's got the power forward eligibility on FanDuel, which makes him very valuable to that slate. Getting him up to the field is fine. The 1-in-4 exposure that we got here is also fine. I'd probably keep him around this level, but he's a good enough per minute producer with realistic expectation of the 26-ish minutes that we've got him projected for. In that same number of minutes the other day, he put up 29.9. That's right on par for Zach Collins' day. 12%, a little bit undercut to the field on DraftKings. Same thing for Poeltl at 10%. Everybody else, not really that relevant. We got a little bit of Filipowski at 4.6, 1% on DraftKings, below the field on both. Randall I talked about in the forward section, but again, looks somewhat appealing on FanDuel. Slightly below the value mark that we're looking for at 74, but he's another guy from the sevens. We get just a few guys, and it's typically our better per minute producers who are landing in like any of these lineups, and he's usually at or below the field. Which makes sense, right? If you're dead in the middle, we're typically star and value guy building. So guys like that just slide into some shares. But he's always a productive enough player. He put up a nice 50 points in 33.9. If you get that kind of production for 7,400, that's a bargain. And Julius Randle is a good player. I talk about him a lot. Good facilitator, underrated facilitator. 19.8% assist rate this year. Decent rebounder, 10.4% rebounding rate, and a decent scorer. 62% true shooting this year. Joker's dreaming under the desk, by the way. If you hear that like scratching noise, it's him. Paws are going against the desk. He dreams about running a lot. For an old fat dog, that's a weird dream to have. Mo Wagner didn't really land. Drew Eubanks didn't really land. WCJ, if he plays, didn't really land. Goga, right now, guys, is not on the board. Would pick up minutes, though, if WCJ doesn't play again. So that's one to potentially watch. He is a 1.08 per minute player, probably more so on DraftKings where he's still 52. He's 1,000 more against the FanDuel cap. Probably wouldn't really land there. Maybe would become like this kind of relevant to the DraftKings slate at 52. Yeah, Collier at the min is a interesting option. I'll put it that way. He does definitely help you lever up to some of those high-priced players in combination with one another. I didn't find the need to go that low. but I expect that we will in some lineups. Pop that up on the screen right now, since we're through the positions. A little bit of ace mine for the those out there who are new. My site, rotoscouts.com. Access to the NBA projections we've been talking about, NFL projections for the showdown slate tonight, NHL projections for a 10-game slate tonight, and in an ongoing sense, every main slate for NBA and NHL, main slate and every showdown slate for football, baseball every main slate when it's in season, under $1 a day, all-in access to all of those sports, and more to come. Gonna build it up, promise. Just gotta get it rolling a little bit. All you guys who have subscribed already, appreciate the hell out of every single one of you guys. Those of you who are new, hit the like button, subscribe bell on YouTube here so you know when these shows kick off, because they are all over the place schedule-wise. And check out rotoscouts.com. There's also a link to our Discord in the chat right now. And then to transition, the site we're looking at now is called acemine.io. This is where we run our sims. They're a friend of the site, friend of going back to the Awesome Mode days. These guys got together, built this site out. They have a great sim tool. They have an optimizer tool that is very good as well. I don't use it quite as much as I use the Sims. Sims are an everyday thing. That is the key for basketball especially. But I use the Sims for football. They've got baseball in here. They've got numerous different sports. Easily the most affordable for that kind of power as far as the entire industry goes. They're not asking for a big price for what they're providing. Promo code RotoScouts, all in caps, 20% off your first month. Let's look at the nature of these lineups. It's FanDuel. We'll start with DraftKings because I know that's what everybody cares about a little bit more. So, definitely, Mr. Bassi landing up toward the top of the board. Obviously, these exposures are represented in all the exposures we just talked about. But, man, do these lineups just take that shape immediately. A lot of commonality across these lineups. This is somewhat a recipe for, like, this could land you in just one big blob of lineups if you just straight line out of your top 150 here. Because there is not a ton of diversity of positions in those, just as an initial take. You can do things like change this to min uniques. And, you know, kind of kick that up so that you're getting different exposures of these lineups. And you can also change how those lineups are scored. I guess I shouldn't have asked it for 5. I've never done that before. I didn't realize it would take this long. This is why you shouldn't experiment on shows. Let me reload this page. So, all right. Pro tip, don't ask for 5 unless you've got a minute to spend. But you can mix those up a little bit was my point there if you want to get a little bit more diversity of lineups in here. But you are cutting into, you know, your different ROI costs. When you set up the sim, you can set up a percentage on how it scores it for projection, ownership, top 1% exposure, top win rate, top 1% rate, projection, ownership, and ROI. So you can set it up. I have it like 60, 10, 15, you know. Most of it goes into ROI. So taking a look at some of these lineups. Definitely difficult to nail down a specific description. Usually I'm like, all right, you can spend money here, you can save there, but there's so much value between these guard spots especially, that it's like, all right, you can spend or save at point or kind of mid with Mike Conley, Chris Paul. Cade and LaMelo, it's nice to see that we're getting the shares of both of those pay-up options on the DraftKings slate like we talked about. I guess it is mostly mid-board and up because it's mostly Sexton, CP3, Mike Conley, or like Cade and LaMelo in these top-end lineups at the point. So, yeah, I'll say mid-range to spendy point. If you're not using Colin Sexton at the point, you're probably putting him at shooting guard. You do have values with Anthony Black there. Stephon Castle is coming through in a lot of those, but a lot of the shooting guard is occupied by Mr. Sexton. So a lot of these are like Conley, Sexton, you know, mid at guard at worst. And a fair number of these, Sexton Castle, LaMelo, and Ant. That's an interesting one. Champagny, Grant Williams, Bassey, Black. Black drops in over here. Collins and Sexton. So the way that these are structured, it does look like you're getting a mandatory one value guard, and it just happened to put it almost exclusively in the guard-only spot. That's where all of our Black and Castle shares have gone. And then a couple of the Sextons creeping over here. So basically among the three guard spots, you get like one spend, one mid, and one cheap, which makes sense. At forward, we do look like we're taking spendy on both, small forward and power forward, with money to spare in most of those lineups for the forward-only spot. We've got a lot of value center with Charles Bassey. We got some Pirtle in there. No AD coming up in the center spot, and we didn't get as much AD on DraftKings as we got on FanDuel. We got way more LeBron. But yeah, definitely looks like the clear path here on DK is spend it forward, spend it power forward, spend it forward, spend on forwards at util, or take another value square there. But pretty clear. And that was exactly what we saw looking down the board in those results, was that top of the forward position was a place where we were seeing LeBron come up. We were seeing Markkanen come up. We were seeing some of these spendy players come up. A big chunk of John Collins was there. So decent amount of money to spend it forward on DK. Let's take a scroll down. You guys can get some ideas. Again, we're not here looking at these saying these are the lineups that you should play, but we're taking a look at the shape and the nature of these lineups to figure out where we want to spend our money. But maybe some inspiration can be taken for basic construction sets as we go down through our top 150 here. Bounce over to FanDuel. It's going to be pretty similar. It's a lot of Mike Conley, Chris Paul back and forth there. We do have some of the pairings of the two old guys. Decent number of pairings of the two old guys, actually. It doesn't really surprise me. Again, both those guys with point guard only eligibility, makes sense that they'd be grabbing in a lot of shares because everybody else basically in that group, the Sextons, the Blacks, the Castles, and so on of the world, everybody else had shooting guard eligibility. And we're seeing that right here. Sexton, Conley, Castle, Black. Basically that four-man combination with Chris Paul swapping in, or a pay-up guy, or Davion Mitchell, but again, that might kick downward a little bit. But that's basically, three of those four guys are landing in most of these lineups as far as our guard positions go. And then it's a matter of what you do over here as far as whether you can spend on one of those spots. Like we got LaMelo here, along with Ant, RJ, Collins, but this lineup took Filipowski along with the Bassey share on the back end. Most of these are taking, Collins, Barrett, AD, Collins, actually. And then Bassey primarily at the center, but we do get some AD shares in the center, which I like because that's what I did. So AD, RJ, John Collins, not a bad three-man group there. I kind of prefer RJ over here because there are other good power forward options. So like if I got this lineup out of an optimizer, out of a sim, and I was only entering one and I was trying to, see what I could do with it, my first instinct would be let's lose Rui. Let's move RJ over to the small forward and then probably sacrifice Jalen Suggs to the value gods, put one of these guys in that, maybe Anthony Black just as a in-team pivot from Suggs, and then see what that buys me at that power forward spot. Can I get Zach Collins in that spot? Can I get Julius Randle in that spot? Can I get Miles Bridges in that spot? So it's a really interesting slate as far as the multi-position and how the values land on this slate. I was really enjoying just clicking some things around earlier, and I think you can do that. Basically on both sites. It's a little bit different configuration across sites as far as that goes, but it is the same thing on FanDuel where significantly more spend is going into the four forward spots on your average lineup. Bridges, Barrett, AD, John Collins, Zach Collins, including the center outside of these Charles Bassey shares. Ant, RJ, John Collins, again, Filipowski and Bassey. That one gets a little value-oriented because it bought LaMelo. Ant, Collins, RJ, AD with Jonathan Isaac kicking a little bit of value into that lineup, but it went with 4 straight of our value guys in the guard spot. This one with Ant in a guard spot is going to take a Collins-Bassey position on the back end. So you can see just the dynamics of how those positions swap. If you take one of the pay-up guards here, you're just straightforward, just taking the Bassey share here and probably getting down to a value guy instead of a mid-board type guy, instead of having a little bit more to spend on your LeBrons, your ADs, your RJs of the world. Interesting slate, the way this thing's coming together. 531 on the nose. Not sure about an NFL show. Got 70 people here hanging out. Hit the like button. I hate jumping off now with everybody just, kind of finding us today. Bunch of people here hanging out. Come on back tomorrow. We'll be doing this again tomorrow and every weekday, breaking down the NBA. Football show on Saturday afternoon for the main slate. We're going to talk through the entire main slate Saturday afternoon. The site is rotoscouts.com. Ton of content for the football main slate to come this week. I'm going to start working on that, getting it all posted up tonight. Been working on the projections in the background. Football showdown projections are posted right now. NBA projections posted right now. Going to get an update as soon as I'm off the show. NHL projections up for the 10-game slate. Access to everything. Under $1 a day for everything. Check out rotoscouts.com. Follow the @rotoscouts Twitter and Blue Sky handles as well, guys. Really appreciate you guys. All you new guys, come on back. Seriously, trying to build up the numbers a little bit. I'd love to get over 1,000 subscribers, and we could start doing some interesting things as far as helping out with YouTube, kicking in some money. So it'd be good for all of us. Help grow this site. But I appreciate every single one of you today. You guys absolutely rock. Hit the subscribe. If I do schedule a show for football, it'll probably be around 6:30. I'm not sure if it's going to land because, like I said, I don't want to be doing that and handling news and building lineups for NBA. And then we lose a little bit of traction if we go after 7 o'clock. So might fall by the wayside today. Stay tuned, though. Let's see if I can get a quick update in. With that in mind, guys, I think that's it. No big questions lingering in the chat. So, yeah, I'm going to say good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something, and we will see you tomorrow. Later, gang.